All right, let's dive right into this explainer. Today, we're taking a truly fascinating journey to uncover the startling historical and theological links between ancient idols and the unseen world. We're going to look at how different cultures and eras have attempted to understand, categorize, and really explain the core nature of evil and misguidance. So, you might be wondering, what exactly connects an ancient storm god to the ultimate rebel of the unseen world? I know, it sounds like the setup to a crazy myth, but we are actually exploring how humanity has historically conceptualized spiritual deception through two of history's most infamous figures, Iblis and Baal. By tracing their origins across ancient scriptures, historical texts, and even medieval occult grimoires, we're basically going to see how the architecture of deception has been mapped out over millennia. To really get our heads around our first figure, Iblis, we gotta first define the concept of the jinn. Now, according to Islamic theology, jinn are beings created from smokeless fire. They exist in an unseen dimension that runs perfectly parallel to our own. But the absolute most critical aspect of their existence is that, much like us humans, they possessed free will. Here is our roadmap for today's explainer. First, the unseen world. Second, Iblis, the first rebellion. Third, Baal, the state idol. Fourth, the occult transmutation. And finally, archetypes of deception. Kicking things off with part 1, the unseen world. Getting a handle on the rules of this unseen environment is absolutely crucial. And these texts actually bust a lot of common myths. According to Quranic sources, jinn are living right alongside us in a parallel dimension, but they are a totally distinct creation from angels. See, angels are essentially beings of light programmed for pure obedience. But jinn, they have the actual capacity to choose between good and evil. The texts note that they can generally see us, even though we can't see them. It's the ultimate hidden vantage point. And that capacity to disobey, that sets the perfect stage for a massive cosmic rebellion. Which brings us to part 2, Iblis and the first rebellion. So the texts tell us that Iblis was actually a jinn who through sheer devotion was essentially promoted to reside among the angels. But then comes this ultimate reality-altering test. God commands him to bow to the brand new human Adam. And Iblis just flat out refuses. His argument? Because his origin of fire is inherently superior to Adam's origin of clay. He literally says, I am better than him. It's wild because this is documented in the sources as the literal first instance of arrogance, a total refusal based entirely on a perceived material or racial superiority. The logic of his pride just completely blinded him to the command of his creator. But hold on, because the text known as the Shams al-Ma'arif throws a massive curveball here. This quote from the mystic Mansur al-Hallaj frames Iblis not just as some cartoon villain of pure malice, but as Majnun, literally driven crazy by his dogmatic, blinding devotion. It's a highly controversial take, right? In this view, Iblis refused to bow to Adam because he absolutely refused to bow to anyone other than God, even fully accepting eternal punishment for his defiance. It is a really fascinating look at how passionate devotion, when it gets too rigid and arrogant, can mutate into outright rebellion. Moving right along to part 3, Baal, the state idol. Shifting gears from that internal, fiery pride of the unseen world over to external materialism and societal control, let's look at our second archetype of deception and watch how this concept builds over centuries. Baal didn't even start as a specific name. In ancient languages, it was just an honorific title meaning master or lord. But as we hit the Bronze Age, Canaanite societies morphed this title into an actual supreme deity of storms and fertility. Fast forward to the Iron Age, and it hits its absolute peak. It wasn't just a localized cult anymore. It became the official, state-mandated religion under King Ahab and Queen Jezebel. And, as we'll see, centuries later, European occultists would completely reimagine him. Let's just pause on this number for a second. 450. Queen Jezebel and King Ahab were just casually worshipping Baal. The historical sources tell us they had 450 state-sponsored priests of Baal on the payroll. These guys were funded by the government, literally eating at the royal table. We're talking about a massive institutional power structure. This perfectly sets the stage for a legendary showdown with the prophet Elias, who steps up to directly challenge this giant state apparatus, urging the people to ditch this symbol of wealth and power and return to monotheism. When you look at how ancient peoples visualized these state-sponsored deities, they weren't just abstract spiritual concepts. They were the tangible pillars of society. They erected these colossal statues to project political dominance, immense wealth, and total control over agriculture. So, bowing down to Baal, That wasn't just a religious act. It was full submission to the state's economic and political machine. Basically, it was the ultimate worship of materialism.
All right, on to part 4, the occult transmutation. This is where things get really weird and honestly super fascinating. We see this massive shift where ancient Middle Eastern theological figures get transmuted by medieval European black magic and left-hand path occultism. Just look at the intricate geometry here. These are literal seals, like the Seal of Lavia, documented in medieval grimoires like the Lesser P of Solomon and the Godia. Occultists took these ancient deities and unseen entities and actually categorized them into this highly structured, almost bureaucratic hierarchy of demons. They drew these exact geometric sigils to supposedly summon, bind, and command these forces for their own personal gain. The ancient Canaanite storm god gets a total reboot in these texts. Baal gets translated into Belial, and he's classified as the 68th goetic demon. He's no longer just the guy you pray to for rain and crops. Now, Belial is described as this incredibly powerful king, created right after Lucifer, who commands 81 legions of spirits. And his main job? The texts say his office is to distribute presentations and senatorships. Yes, literally handing out political favors and titles. It's wild. They completely absorbed this ancient Middle Eastern lore into European occult taxonomy, yet he remains deeply, deeply tied to the granting of worldly political power. Finally, we arrive at part 5, archetypes of deception.
Bringing this all together, we really have to ask what these entities historically represent deep within the human psyche. Why do these stories stick around, and what are they trying to teach us? While they aren't just spooky tales, they are very distinct frameworks used to explain how humanity strays from the truth. Iblis represents the internal deception. It's the danger lurking in the mind, arrogance, the illusion of supremacy, and a dogmatism that just defies all logic. Baal, on the flip side, represents the external deception. That's the danger of society, corrupt state power, the seduction of massive wealth, and prioritizing materialism over morality.
And that brings us to a final thought for you to chew on. Does the real danger of these figures actually lie out there in the supernatural, or is it firmly rooted in the very human vulnerabilities of arrogance, greed, and the pursuit of power that they represent? Because as we've seen in this explainer today, the ultimate deception might not be hiding in the shadows of the unseen world at all. It might just be rooted deep within our own human nature. Thanks for exploring this with me, and always keep questioning what you see.